Good evening, loyal listeners, and welcome to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales and Other Weird Stories. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Each week I invite you to dim the lights and settle in as we explore a dark and unsettling tale of the paranormal. Stories conjured by authors from all over the world. If you dare to share a fiction of your own, submit it at frighteningtales.com. And should you find yourself still hungry, more than 130 previous episodes are awaiting you, patiently in the dark. Today's tale is written by author M.A., a medical student that previously studied dentistry before making the shift to medicine. He enjoys watching movies, reading, writing stories, and songs, and hopes that one day he and his stories will make it big. Perhaps that can start with his tale, The Wreckage.
Well, I know what I'm about to say to you today is gonna make you doubt my sanity. But I don't care. I don't even think about it at all. When you sit looking up at a knotted rope hanging from the ceiling and your chair is carelessly placed underneath it, you know that thinking about what others think of you is ridiculous, with no value. My name is Ray McDevil, a former United States Air Force officer, lieutenant colonel. Everyone would have recognized me for my excellence and good behavior. Until a few months ago, of course. Before what happened. At this hard time in my life, I was sent to a small island in a neighboring friendly country. I was assigned to train our newly graduated pilots in the difficult conditions of flying over the ocean. And because the island was located in an unstable area, in terms of weather, it was well suited to provide the right conditions for our mission. I remember the day this whole story began in every horrifying detail, right down to the smell of salt in the air and the iodine-laden ocean breeze caressing my face. It's still indelible in my memory, and perhaps it was destined never to be forgotten. That day, the weather was mild, and the sky was clear. So my colleague John Smith and I decided to rest our pilots and give them the day off. I was about to return to the airport in my Jeep before the signal officer interrupted me by coming to my office, rushing in and holding in his hand a letter that was sent to me from command, telling me to go west to check this location where a drone had reported to have violated the airspace of that friendly country. I could have taken one of the pilots with me in my plane, but I chose not to, a decision I would later regret. I left with my plane at 10 o'clock in the morning, and as I said, the weather was really great. I enjoyed the few minutes it took for the plane to head west. When I actually reached my destination, I felt a little strange. The sky was oddly clear. I couldn't see a single cloud, and even the sea was darker than normal. I could look a few miles ahead, but I could see nothing. There was no sign of any drone, no life in the air, not even a single bird flying around to ease my loneliness. I toured the place for half an hour, and the stillness of this area was unsettling. Minutes passed carrying a weight when I was sure there was no danger or the possibility of any unauthorized aircraft. I contacted the control tower, informing them that I would end the flight, because I did not find any aircraft and that I was on my way back to base. As I started my flight back, everything by the book, going through the usual routine, I continued flying for a few moments until I saw it. Far below was what I could describe only as a naval vessel. It was too far to tell if it was one of ours. It was a fairly large ship, not like the modern vessels I was used to seeing, but it was big enough to see from my altitude. It wasn't really a warship, it was either a cargo ship or passenger vessel. I couldn't tell from where I was, but I ruled out the latter since the ship looked a bit old, like those ships from the 1940s. I knew it would be difficult for a vessel like that to carry passengers in this day and age, but it might have been a themed cruise or of some kind. I felt curious for a few moments and wanted to get a closer look. But I was on a schedule and didn't feel that it was enough of a threat to spare the fuel. I flew for 2 minutes at most when the thought hit me. What if this was a smuggling vessel? The question occupied my mind, so I contacted the control tower to tell them what I'd seen, while I turned the plane back to the place where I'd seen the ship. The control tower's response was alarming. They told me that there was no vessel appearing on the radar, which confused me. I knew something was wrong, so I started looking for the ship everywhere. To my surprise, I couldn't find a trace of it. That day, after returning to base, I filled out my report like I'd done 1,000 times. I kept debating if I'd mention the ship in my log. If I was seeing things, I could get grounded, I could lose my teaching post. When I checked with the radar room after my return, they showed me the recording of the radar screens in the area around my plane. At the same time, I told the control tower about the ship, but they were right. The only thing anywhere in the area was the ping of my plane. I wondered if the alcohol from the night before was still in my system, but I was sure I was fully focused when I left the base. I wondered if the high temperature and thin atmosphere might have something to do with it, with my apparent hallucination. So, I neglected to bother Command with the story. I preferred to keep it to myself. I told John, my friend, all about it. His opinion was the same as mine. Maybe it was the alcohol. He warned me not to do it again, drink so close to flights. I promised him and also asked him not to tell anyone about it, and he gave me his word. The next few days passed in a routine. I would start the day with morning flights, preceded by a break in the afternoon in which the education is theoretical. Then our day ends with evening flights. Those evenings were my most favorite thing. The weather was warm, a perfect balance of cold and hot, making for wonderful sunsets. We deliberately flew in groups of 3 trainee planes, the 4th being the commander's plane, which was either me or John. It was 5 days after I thought I had seen the ship, and after we finished our daily flights, it was almost 11 o'clock in the evening. I was back in my office, finishing the daily report to Command, when my phone rang on the desk. The caller was the signal officer. He told me that I had received an urgent request from Command to head east. There was a fighter plane violation of the island's airspace. It was strange that such a violation occurred that late at night. I hung up with the officer. I was tired and did not want to fly now, but something urged me to go to the airport and start flying. Besides, orders are orders. I knew that I was the only pilot suitable for the mission. I had just left John a few minutes ago at his quarters. We'd had a few drinks in the canteen. It didn't take many minutes for me to get myself ready while the engineers prepped the plane for flight. Having already outfitted with whatever offensive weapons I might need, I left the airport at 23:10 hours. The sky was dark. The flight ceiling was low. The clouds were almost everywhere. The flying conditions were difficult, but I managed to reach the place where the plane had last been seen on the radar. The radar in the control tower was already tracking it, and I was following its instructions. The plane was flying low, so I needed to reduce my altitude from 30,000 feet to 10,000 feet to see it clearly. It was an F-16. I fired warning shots at it from afar. Then its pilot tried to communicate with me by radio. I hesitated. Finally, I answered him. He told me that he was not an enemy. He lost his way and lost contact with his command. His voice seemed sincere, scared. He told me that his radar was broken and his fuel was about to run out. I told him to wait. I contacted the control tower and asked that the call be directed to the command. Their response was clear. I will take him to the base until the next decision comes to us. I told him the order. He did not object. I even listened to the exhalation of relief. I flew at a slightly higher altitude than him while he was ahead of me, and I gave him the coordinates to the base. That was the second time I saw that strange ship. I was not the one who noticed it. The other pilot noticed it and asked me about it, trying to start a seemingly friendly conversation. His English accent was weak. When I saw it, I felt my hair stand in place for a few moments. I could not believe my eyes. I looked at my radar, but the vessel was not showing up. I ignored the remark on the ship, pretending not to want to talk. But my head was full of questions. This time it was easy to recognize that this was indeed a tourist ship, as the lights of festivities on board were clearly reflected in the dark water. The day after the second sighting of that ship, I sat in my office absent-mindedly. I had taken the day off from training. I had to attend the interrogation that took place with that officer after he was detained. His words were somewhat logical. The military leadership contacted the leadership of his country, and the two agreed to release the pilot and his plane. After it had been checked for at least the 100th time since yesterday, and after it had been disarmed, of course. I believe that the decision to release him had a political rather than military dimension, as I later learned that his country had nothing to do with the drone that penetrated the island's airspace just a few days ago. Command also told me that Major John and I were assigned to take him to the border and make sure he left our airspace safely. I wasn't comfortable with the idea of flying again, but the order to take John with me had calmed me down a bit. I hadn't told anyone about the ship since I saw it, just me and the pilot, and I thought he must have forgotten about it by now. He had enough to worry about with his command. We left the airport a few minutes before sunset. The weather was kind of nice. I'd pilot, John would sit in the back seat, helping me if we needed weapons intervention. We lifted off with our plane ahead of the escort and circled the base for a number of minutes. Unusual for a mission like this, but I wanted to be alone with my friend to tell him about the mystery ship. But for some reason I hesitated, and I didn't tell him anything. We followed our escort at an altitude of 25,000 feet. The pilot was talking on the radio in a friendly and thankful tone. John was talking back to him every now and then, while I remained silent. Finally, we reached the border of international waters after 20 minutes of flying, and there we let him go on his way. After we'd completed our mission and made sure he had left the border, we proceeded to return to base. It was already evening, and John jokingly told me that he was going to buy me a drink, although I doubted it. We talked for a few minutes in a friendly conversation. He had noticed my restlessness and anxiety, although He still didn't understand the real reason behind it. He wanted to say something, but he quickly interrupted, saying that he had seen an object floating on the surface of the water below us. I looked at where he said. "To your 2 o'clock, Ray, over there. I think it's a ship." I can't explain how I reacted when I saw the damn thing for the 3rd time. At first, I was afraid, but soon I was overcome with anger. I looked at the radar and didn't see it. I pointed that out to John, and he confirmed that he didn't see it on his radar either. I quickly told him what happened to me when I saw it while taking the pilot to the base. John was excited. He told me to approach it a little closer to see what it was. Maybe it is an abandoned ship, although I doubted it. Even abandoned ships appear on the radar, and of course, abandoned ships do not show lights and festivities on their decks. I liked the idea of approaching it at a safe distance for both of us. It may be a cruise ship after all, and not appearing on the radar due to technical malfunction. We did not want trouble, but my curiosity makes me blind. I pressed the stick down a little. I reduced my altitude to 10,000 feet in just a few seconds. I would have liked to keep this altitude, but something I didn't recognize about the ship made me change my mind, and I dropped to 2,000 feet. Then I saw it. Long, black things surrounding the ship in a strange way. I thought I was dreaming. I saw the passengers on deck screaming for help. I don't know how, but I could hear their voices from my position clearly, knowing that that was impossible due to the distance of my airplane, the canopy. The long objects were more like tentacles or arms. I can't describe what I saw accurately. It was like something demonic. There were screams from the deck as the ship sounded its horns incessantly. It was maddeningly frightening. I don't know how I got the courage, but I had made up my mind and made my decision. I quickly told John that I was going to shoot those damn arms. We have to save the innocent people on board. John didn't say anything. He was so scared. I fired intensely at those tentacles, and to my surprise, the bullets didn't hit them at all, as if they were swallowing them whole. My shots didn't seem to have any effect, but the number of arms now increased, terrifyingly. And soon I saw innocent passengers trying to escape with their lives by jumping overboard. It was a very frightening sight. Then I had a crazy thought. If bullets don't affect these things, the missiles definitely will. I told John what I was going to do. It was the first time he'd spoken since the whole damn thing started, and he was reluctant. He told me in a firm tone, "No, that's not our business." But I did not listen to him. I prepared the missile to attack one of the arms, which was rising in the air, moving towards the ship. I performed an aerial maneuver with my plane while I put my left hand on the launch button. I did not want to hit the ship. I required great accuracy, and then I did it. I pressed the button. What happened next is crazy. I don't know how the arm avoided the missile, and when it fell and hit the surface of the water, causing a deafening explosion, all the arms swooped down on the ship in a fast movement. They pulled it with them to the depths. The appearance of the remaining passengers on the surface of the water was terrifying. I tried to communicate with the control tower, but for some reason the communication with the tower was cut off. I wished at this moment that I could send help to come and save the people. When I knew that we could not communicate with the base, I decided to fly there as soon as possible. maybe we would end up saving many lives. We arrived at the base in 5 minutes, having memorized the location of the shipwreck by heart. 2 military planes and a helicopter equipped with rescue operations came out behind us, while the control tower told me that they had contacted the Naval Command to send rescue ships, even though they did not actually see the ship on the radar. I must now explain the rest of my story briefly, as I have little time left in my life, and my tears have already begun to fall on the surface of the paper as I write this damned story. Of course, it didn't end there. The truth is that we couldn't find the ship again, nor the wreckage. Even the survivors, they were never found. 2 warships did come to the place by 9 o'clock, but they didn't find anything either. I had to justify my position. There was no physical evidence of the ship's presence at all. Not even the existence of those demonic arms. I was summoned to an interrogation in the commander's office. I told him what I'd seen from the beginning. Of course, he did not believe a word I said. It was crazy, and I was in big trouble. I'd already mobilized a large number of army troops and even wasted a number of bullets and a missile in what the commander saw as a false alarm and negligence. John's testimony was the same as mine, although they had to wait for him to sober up after giving him a tranquilizer because he was hysterical when we returned to the base. John and I were shown to a psychiatrist who was working with us on the base, and after I told him my story, he ordered that I be put under observation in a mental hospital back home for a few months, because he thought that what I was saying might be a delusion of some psychotic symptoms. The only evidence I could prove was that the communications with the control tower had already been interrupted by some kind of interference that no one could find. I ended up in that damn sanatorium for 3 months. I knew then that I was discharged for being mentally unhealthy, because I was adamant about what I saw that day. And that's also when these strange fantasies and dreams started to form. Something was talking to me in a language I never knew. I don't think it was a human language. But for some reason I couldn't understand it. It was urging me to commit suicide, to get rid of myself, to end that suffering. At that time, the news of the suicide of John, who had also been committed to another institution and discharged from service for almost the same reason as me, hit me like a thunderbolt. I knew that he must have faced what I faced, but he finally gave in to it. God, how sad and ashamed I feel that I caused him so much harm. In the months following John's death, I tried to look for a scientific explanation for what we'd seen, but I couldn't find anything at all. But by pure chance, while reading a book, I came across a mention of the disappearance of an American cruise ship a few decades ago, a ship called the USS Archimedes, which left New York Harbor for Naples, Italy, with approximately 2,800 people on board. The ship suddenly disappeared from radar, and after the captain sent distress messages while panicking that they were being attacked, the book was about the strangest disappearances in history, and this was one of the most important incidents mentioned in the book, saying that to this day no one has found the ship. That's what he believes, of course, and everyone else on board is considered dead. I knew then that what I had encountered might be some kind of time portal, which would explain why the bullets didn't hit the damn arms and the ship didn't show up on the radar. I hid it in my head for months. The bad dreams ended when I found out. But I'd already made up my mind. I'm going after John. I don't deserve to live another day. I guess a rope will do. Unfortunately, my weapon was confiscated after I was discharged. Thank God they didn't prosecute me as a mental patient, of course. I couldn't have gotten out of prison life so easily. I left the sanatorium a few days ago, and I'm sitting here finishing my words at home. I wanted to write them down in a paper, just because I wanted to get that heavy weight off my ankles. Although, I'm not sure if anyone else will read them. I hope that when they find my body, it will catch their attention and somehow leak to the press. I wish I could explain my situation to someone. If someone is reading my words, I thank them with all my heart, and I wish them happy days in life, other than the one I've experienced. Goodbye, and see you all in the other world, if there really is one.
Thank you, dear listeners, for venturing into the dark with me tonight. Return next week for another dark tale, lurking just beyond the veil. If you enjoyed your journey with me, support my work. Like, subscribe, rate, or leave a comment wherever possible. Most of all, share frightening tales and support the authors who dared to dream these machinations. Buy their books, read their writing, watch their videos, whatever you can. Until next time, when a new tale creeps across the airwaves, listen closely, if you're brave enough.